Okay, so picture this. You're looking at a map of Europe at night. You know, one of those satellite images. The coastlines, they're just glowing. You've got Spain, Italy, massive cities built right on the ocean. But then your eyes drift up to Germany's northwest coast, and it all just goes dark. Right? For hundreds of miles, on what should be some of the most valuable coastline in the world, there's pretty much nothing. So what gives? Why doesn't a major economic powerhouse like Germany have a huge city right here? Well, the answer is this incredible story of geography, a little bit of history, and a whole lot of survival.
So the first piece of the puzzle is that the environment itself, it's basically a geographic trap. The very land and sea here are just completely hostile to the idea of building anything big and permanent.
We're talking about a place called the Wadden Sea, and let me tell you, this is no ordinary coastline. There's no clear beach, no dramatic cliffs. It's this murky, muddy zone somewhere between land and sea. Twice every single day, the tide goes out for miles, and it leaves behind this vast, kind of alien landscape of mud. It's just incredibly exposed.
See, the real problem here is what's underneath your feet, or maybe what isn't underneath your feet. To build a big city, you need solid bedrock. This coast, it has none. It's all just soft clay, loose sand, and these deep, spongy peat bogs left over from the last ice age. Trying to build a metropolis here would literally be like trying to build a skyscraper on a wet sponge. The ground is just too soft, it's sinking, and it is completely at the mercy of the sea.
And it's not just the land, oh no. The water itself is a massive problem. The North Sea isn't some deep, stable ocean. It's pretty shallow. And its shape? For this part of the coast, it's a geographic nightmare. It forms this giant funnel that's really wide up north and gets dangerously narrow right where it hits Germany.
So, when a big Atlantic storm comes roaring in, it pushes a massive wall of water into this funnel. Well, where's all that water going to go? It has nowhere to go but up. This creates what the Germans call a Sturmflut, a storm surge. And because the coastline is so flat and so soft, the water doesn't just flood the land. No, it acts like a bulldozer. It just rips up the mud and swallows the coast whole. And you know what? The people who first tried to settle here, they learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable.
And this brings us to the history, the really chilling proof of this danger. It's the story of a very wealthy city that completely vanished in a single night. You know, the first settlers here, the Frisians, they completely baffled the Romans. The Roman writer Pliny the Older, he called them a miserable amphibious people. He said they looked like sailors on ships when the tide was in, and then like shipwrecked castaways when it went out. I mean, they had to build their homes on these huge man-made mounds of mud just to stay dry. But, you know, over the centuries, they got a little ambitious, a little too confident. They started building dikes to hold back the sea and claim more land. They drained all those spongy peat bogs to create farmland. And on the surface, it looked like a miracle, but it was a fatal mistake. See, when you drain peat, it compresses and it sinks. They didn't realize it, but they were actually lowering their own land, pushing their homes further and further below sea level. And the poster child for this fatal confidence was a city called Rungholt. It was a booming port, considered the absolute jewel of the coast. But all of its wealth was built on that sinking foundation. Then, on January 15, 1362, a massive storm surge hit. They later called it the Grote Mandrenke, which means the great drowning of men. The dikes just failed. The water poured in and dissolved the very earth beneath the city. And just like that, in a single night, the entire city of Rungholt and, it's estimated, around 25,000 people were just violently ripped out to sea, completely erased from the map. After that, the destruction sent a terrifying message across the continent. You just can't invest, you can't build a future in a place where the map itself can be totally redrawn by a single storm. The risk was just way too high. And so, the money and the power, it moved. So where did it go? It moved inland. Instead of fighting this impossible battle with the coast, Germany found this brilliant geographic workaround, its massive network of rivers. And this is exactly why a city like Hamburg became such a powerhouse. Look, it's 65 miles inland, far, far away from all that coastal chaos. The Elbe River is deep enough for massive ocean-going ships, but its location way inland absorbs all the energy of a storm surge. And, crucially, it's built on a solid foundation. Hamburg gave you all the benefits of a major port with absolutely none of the existential risk.
And Hamburg wasn't the only one. You see cities like Bremen on the Weser River doing the exact same thing. These rivers became, in effect, protected highways to the ocean, letting Germany completely bypass its own dangerous coastline.
Okay, but wait a minute. This raises a really big question, right? Because Germany's next-door neighbor, the Netherlands, they share the exact same violent sea and that same sinking soil. But they went ahead and built Amsterdam and Rotterdam right there on the water. So why did the Dutch fight when the Germans retreated?
It all boils down to one simple thing: luxury versus necessity. For Germany, moving inland was a geographic luxury. They had a huge, solid interior they could fall back on. But for the Dutch, it was a geographic necessity. The entire Netherlands is basically one giant low-lying river delta. For them, retreating inland would mean walking right out of their own country. The choice was simple: fight the ocean or cease to exist.
All right, so let's put the final pieces of this whole puzzle together. We've got the hostile geography, we've got the safe alternatives inland, but there's one more really crucial factor at play here.
And that final piece, it's all about politics.
You see, for most of its history, Germany wasn't one unified country. It was this fractured mosaic of hundreds of tiny, bickering states. Those poor little communities on the coast, they had no powerful, centralized government to fund the enormous engineering projects you'd need to tame the sea. And the wealthy inland cities like Hamburg, they had absolutely no incentive to pay taxes to protect their coastal rivals.
So there you have it. You put it all together, and you get this perfect storm of factors. The German coast is empty because of a hostile, sinking geography, the existence of safe, deep rivers as an alternative, and centuries of political division that made any unified war against the sea totally impossible.
And what's there today? Not skyscrapers, not massive ports. It's the Wadden Sea National Park, which is actually a protected UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's almost like humans took a long, hard look at this landscape, calculated the risk, and just said, you know what, let's just leave this one to nature.
Which leaves us with one heck of a final thought, doesn't it? In our modern age, where coastal cities all over the world are facing the very real threat of rising sea levels, you really have to wonder, was Germany's centuries-old decision to retreat from the coast not a surrender, but maybe the smartest choice of all?